So one of the things I love most about the City of Danbury is that it has been since 1684 growing because people have made Danbury a choice. They have chosen to come here. And because of the choices that generations of people new to our country or who were already previously living here, indigenous populations made, Danbury has grown for almost every year of its lifespan since 1684. And I think that's amazing. And all of that constant growth and all of that new energy and mixing with people who've been here for generations and people who would literally just step foot in our country has made Danbury a center for culture and entertainment and humanitarian and humanities-based organizations that really breathe life into the community. And at the center of all of that has been the Danbury Library.
Can you tell us some memories that you've had growing up here surrounding the Danbury Library?
So growing up in Danbury was a wonderful way to grow up. You know, we have all of these great city parks and we have all of these public institutions, but we also have the library at the center, the heart of it all. And so I would walk down here. I have two younger brothers, so my parents would walk us down to the library. We grew up on Park Avenue, and it was only a couple blocks walk, and it seemed like a much bigger journey when we were smaller. And once or twice a month, we would check out a series of books. And we started in the junior library, and then we made our way down to the adult library as we grew older. And it was something we did, but it was something we did on purpose. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, time to go to the library again. It was, oh yeah, time to go to the library. I'm so excited, we're going to the library. And we'd get here and there'd be so many different choices. You know, there's so many different things to read, and then the collection was always changing. So, you know, we could follow a whole author in a whole series, or we could, you know, try something new. And as we grew up with the library. And the library continued to expand to meet our community needs and to meet our needs as a family with tons of different programs. I feel like the library's programs have been expanding and expanding over the last several decades and really turning into what our community needed it to be. Not just a repository of books, but a repository of books and a community center. And that's at the heart of what makes the Danbury Library a wonderful place to be for the last 150 years.
What were some series that you love to check out from here?
Oh, Trixie Belden was one of my favorites when I was a child. When I was a child, the Trixie Belden books were a series that was all about this little group of friends solving mysteries. I loved Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, Tom Swift, sorry, not Tom Sawyer, although I did like him too. Can't say I didn't like Huckleberry Finn because I did, but my fan fiction growing up was always mystery-based. So Agatha Christie, when I was in 5th grade, and I was introduced to the Agatha Christie series, and Miss Marple, who is one of my perennial favorites as a character, just made me want to look around the next corner, to look more critically at the world, to find context in the world around me, and solve the world's mysteries. And maybe that's why I do what I do now, because running a small museum and being a historian is all about solving the mysteries of the past and explaining them in the present.
Same thing here. When I was a kid, had something called Encyclopedia Brown.
Oh, I loved Encyclopedia Brown. Yes, he was fun too. And then you could flip to the end and it was like short mysteries and you had little things at the end. It was just so much fun. Yeah, and now, you know, I bring my kids. We library hop, or we can do all kinds of different things with the library. We don't actually have to be here. We can do them at home, off-site. And, you know, my kids love Geronimo the mouse, and who's fab. You know, we love stories about action and adventure, and I have a child who loves biography, and the library gives them not just the space to explore those books, but the opportunity to take those books home, to explore online, and really make the world a bigger place for people who live in the small town of Danbury, Connecticut.
So tell us about one of the best parts about being executive director of the Danbury Museum.
Okay, so there are so many good aspects of getting to live my dream job and be the executive director at the Danbury Museum and the city historian. But I would say that although I love the artifacts and I love the buildings and I love the diaries, the deeds, and the photographs, what I love the most is meeting people and hearing everybody's story. So, you know, I might meet someone who's just moved to Danbury and they want to tell me their story of how they're exploring the town, and they want to say, oh, where should I go next? Or what about this? And I don't understand this. And so getting to share Danbury that I know with people who are new to Danbury is an awesome, awesome experience. But it's just as much fun to have that conversation with the people who might have been here for multi-generations to say, hey, did you know? Or they tell me the story that then we can incorporate into the museum's archive of stories or in the oral history project that you're doing. And it makes Danbury come alive. You know, the people who live here now, whether they've lived here for multiple generations or for the last 5 minutes, they're all Danburyans, and we all have these great stories to share. And when we share those stories, whether it's at the library or at the Danbury Museum or out, you know, at one of the many local events downtown, we're sharing community, we're building community, and that is a wonderful, wonderful aspect of living and working here in Danbury, is that everyone wants to share their story, and doing that makes us so much closer.
Can you share with us some of your favorite Danbury stories?
Oh, there are so many. Where to start? So I love the stories that show how Danbury has grown positively. And what that means is that I tend to like and share the stories about Danbury's successes, although there have been just as many failures. But as we all know, a failure often leads to success after. So some of the fun things that I share about Danbury is our first main industry wasn't actually hatting. So we had a brief foray into comb making, and that didn't go so well. But at the same time, we learned a lot of lessons as a community, as individual business persons, and they took those lessons and built a much stronger, more successful hatting industry. And as most people watching this video will know, because of our hatting industry, Danbury grew to be what it is today. We wouldn't have people from all around the world calling Danbury home. We wouldn't speak more than 54 languages in our public schools if we hadn't had a hatting industry to draw people in, to work, to earn money, to build homes, to build families, generation after generation from 1851 up until the 1980s when the last hat factory closed. I love our stories that revolve around our hat factories. There's romance, there's intrigue, there's all kinds of mysteries, but in the end, it's the stories of the individual people who made a choice to come here so that they could build a better life for themselves. It's the individual factory owners who decided to go all in and build a business and hire hundreds of different workers, making it possible for so many people to find economic success for themselves, for their families, for extended generations. It's an amazing story. Some of our other stories that I'd like to share with our friends around the Danbury community revolve around the great, amazing, funny, sarcastic stories that were written down by a man named Bailey. So James Montgomery Bailey was a Danbury boy. He grew up here. He fought in the Civil War on the side of the Union, came back to Danbury, and with his friend Donovan bought the local paper. And he proceeded to turn that local paper from a small local circulation into a major regional circulating endeavor, and people all across the country ended up buying subscriptions to the paper because his writing, his style was very similar to Mark Twain. It was funny, it was acerbic, it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but they were great stories. And so he oftentimes told great stories that we tell today to our Danbury community, especially our school children, like the Serpent of Kenosha or the Beast of Pembroke. Or he would incorporate local characters into his stories, and you knew who he was talking about, whether they were political figures or figures of industry within the town, and he would make them more accessible as people. And he was just funny. So a lot of the stories that we share, the big stories, are courtesy of one man who wrote down a ton of different stories. And after he died, a group of local women funded another woman, Susan Benedict Hill, to come in and compile all of those stories and put them, especially his stories of our local history, and put them into one book called The History of Danbury. And so Bailey's History of Danbury from 1684 until 1894 is this great collection of our past, and it's compiled by Bailey but edited by Susan Benedict Hill, and it's incredibly well done.
About some stories about
So I grew up raised Roman Catholic, and I'm still a practicing Catholic, And the church figured very much so in my young life, and not in a typical way. I was really lucky that I had wonderful grandparents who lived in town on both sides of my family, but I also had my great aunt who was very involved in our lives growing up, Sister Marita Daniel. And she was the principal at St. Peter's School, which my brothers and I attended. We were fourth generation to go to St. Peter's School in our family. And Sister Marita Daniel, SM, we called her, was the principal. And she took an active interest in my brothers and our education, and I had a really special relationship with her. And she lived in the convent right down here on Main Street, and I was occasionally allowed when I was a little bit older to walk to the convent. But we also spent a lot of time in the convent growing up, hanging out, and they had this huge, it was 3 stories tall, and it was huge, and there were only a couple sisters who lived in St. Peter's Convent when I was growing up. So you know, we'd be allowed to ring the bell. There's a secret doorbell and a knock to get into the building. And if we were there, my brothers and I would have the run of the building. We could go into all of the rooms, all the different floors. And they had a special library over there. And if I was really good, SM would let me borrow books from the convent. And a lot of these were not first-run editions. These are books that had been in the convent or had been donated over there. So some of them were actually even big print, but I liked that when I was a kid. And some of my most special memories are reading the books that she shared with me. Some of them were about faith, some of them were just biographies, and some of them were histories, and being able to do that anywhere in the convent. So grabbing a couple books and hiding away in a room upstairs, I felt like I was in a castle surrounded by some of my best friends, all of these great books. And I had all the time and space that I wanted to explore all of these different places and all these different ideas. And it was I look back on it and think I was really lucky. I was really blessed to have her in my life and for her to take an interest in my education and my brother's education. She was an amazing woman. And she was the principal of a school and stood tall on Main Street every time the Memorial Day parade came down the road. And everyone knew who she was. And I remember as a kid thinking, wow, that's so cool. And she's sharing all these books with me. I better read them. And I did. And that is, I would say that is one of my earliest memories of being a good reader, was reading with Sister Marita Daniel. My father and my mother were big readers too, but we read in different ways at my house, and they read to us. Sister Marita Daniel expected me to read and then report, so I did. And it was an incredible gift.
Now, did you go to the Danbury Fair?
So I was 5 when the Danbury Fair closed, and my brothers will tell you that I have Danbury Fair recovered memory syndrome. Because
I do too.
I've been surrounded by all of the information at the Danbury Museum for the last 20 years of the Danbury Fair, and I've incorporated a lot of that, but I don't have very many memories of the Danbury Fair. I have the memories of a 5-year-old who remembers going into the fair, holding my mother's hand, and my mom saying, "Don't let go," because it was super crowded. The fair was always really crowded. And I had 2 younger brothers, and my dad was holding on to both of their hands. And we went to wondrous places. The candle making section made a really big impact on me as a kid. You know, seeing all of these and all these crafts and the rides and the smells. And I think part of what I incorporate the most in my memory of the fair is the smell and the sound. You know, it was so loud, it was a cacophony of voices, and everybody was having fun. It was people, you know, "Oh my gosh, this over here," or "Did you get this?" or "Hot dogs," or "Kielbasi," or "Fried dough," and then the smell of all those foods too. So it was all of the people, all of the smells, all the sounds. The Danbury Fair was great. You know, Danbury has been associated with a major fair since 1820. And in the late 1860s and the 1870s, when we had our own separate fair, we moved away from the Fairfield County Agricultural Fair, had our own fair. It was just another part of what made Danbury so special. You know, people saved, especially the school kids who got a full day off school, and Mr. Leahy was running the fair, and a free ticket to enter, saved their money all year long because you knew the fair was coming, and it would have delights, silly putty, food, toys, rides, amazing things to see. You know, it was another part of what makes Danbury really special. For one full week in the fall, to hear the fair, to know the fair was here, to know that hundreds, if not thousands of people were coming each day to our city to go to the fair. Wow, that's pretty cool.
It only happened for 1 week?
Well, it happened for 10 days.
10 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
10 days every October.
Wow. And they had like a Danbury.
Except for that 1918 and a couple of years during the war, World War II.
Now they had like a Danbury Day, right? Where all the kids go to school, they just went to.
Yes.
The fair.
So everybody, after World War II, when Mr. Leahy really saved the fair. After World War II, a lot of agricultural fairs around the country, well, they faded away. You know, people had gone away. They'd seen so much during the war that the agricultural fairs across the country didn't really hold the same kind of excitement that they had in the past. But Mr. Leahy, who owned Leahy Fuel, had acquired the shares in the fair after World War II, and he saved the fair. He made it move from just an agricultural model to one of entertainment and exposition in a way that it had not been before World War II. And because he did that, he made the fair that much more exciting, that much more fun. The fair was the center for all good things in the city of Danbury for 10 days in October. And our Danbury school children were given a ticket, an entrance ticket, and a day off school to go to the Danbury Fair. It was amazing. And my dad would tell me stories about saving his money with his brothers, all their pennies, all their nickels, all their dimes. And they would go, you know, laden down, you know, their pockets full on the day the school kids had free entry. And it was, the world was his oyster. And they had a lot of fun.
Now, I'm going to ask you, thank you, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask you, we're almost done.
That's good.
What do you see Danbury, since I'm a big fan of Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov and the whole
Oh, you want me to
foundation,
prognosticate?
it's like,
Okay.
they take a being a historian, and then you kind of see where you know history.
Okay.
And you know where we're going.
This is not like a Cassandra-like thing, right?
No,
Like a
no,
series?
no, no. If you remember, those Foundation series
Sure.
of books. I think it was Asimov did those books and everything. You have like, oh, they know the history for the next 10,000 years, and they know history, they know human nature and everything. And tell me where you see Danbury in the future, like 20 years from now. And do you see a
Sure.
reemergence of maybe the Danbury Fair, like Mayor Marcus said, and he's bringing Uncle Sam back. You know, he just brought him back, and he's in front of the Danbury Railway Museum and everything. So, what do you think? Well, what are your thoughts?
So where do I see Danbury in 20 years? Well, I think I'll have thicker glasses, so I'll probably see it through behind the lens. But Danbury, since 1684, has never had a year where it's gotten smaller. And since 1851, every major immigrant wave, a portion of that wave has landed here in Danbury. I don't see anything that would make our future different. And so that means, to me, that means continuous growth, positive growth. You know, new people coming into Danbury, new businesses that will be starting. You know, we have expanded our town so that there are multiple centers for both commerce and for public enjoyment. Our park system has grown, and I don't see that changing. I see Danbury continuing to grow. We're in a great state. We live in a beautiful, successful, small city, and we do our best to make sure that that city continues to grow. And so I hope that one, if not all three of my children will choose to stay here. My husband and I chose to stay here in Danbury because we love it. We love the fact that Danbury is positive and growing, and that it is focused on the humanities and humanitarian endeavors. So when you ask what I think Danbury will look like in 20 years, I think that we will have more growth. So I think we'll be over 100,000 persons within the city, I hope, because that will be positive growth. And I hope our grand list is bigger than ever, and I hope that we're focusing, as we've done in the past and continue to do, on the growth of our schools and on the library. I hope our library continues to expand for the next 150 years to meet the needs of the community the way it has done so well for the last 150.
Thank you, and I hope the museum grows.